So this is the Updates on Clinical Trials and Treatment Pipeline webinar by Sickle. A little bit about Sickle. We are a national SCD advocacy organization with a mission to elevate the voices of the SCD community. We work to influence decision makers to propel positive change. And some of those positive changes that we've been seeing today are the developments of new treatments. And we're pleased to be joined today by 3 companies who will present on their work in the sickle cell space. So today we're going to do just some quick company introductions. We'll have our presentations, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A at the end of the day. So our first speaker today will be from Quilt Health. The guest speaker is Jasmine Coleman, and she is a healthcare strategist, operator, and entrepreneur whose career spans the life sciences, payer innovation, and digital health. And drawing from her upbringing at the intersection of community health and entrepreneurship, Jasmine's work is grounded in the belief that innovative healthcare solutions can and must reach the communities that need them most. Prior to co-founding Quilt Health, she held leadership roles at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Myriad Women's Health, and Johnson & Johnson, advancing access to healthcare innovations across clinical, commercial, and community settings. And Jasmine holds an executive MBA from Suffolk University, a master's in management from Wake Forest University, and a bachelor's of arts in philosophy and Mandarin Chinese from Hamilton College. Our second presenter is from IHP Therapeutics with guest speaker Rinko Ghosh. With more than 30 years of leadership experience in the biopharmaceutical and life sciences industries, Rinko has built and led innovative companies focused on advancing transformative therapies and improving global health. As co-founder and CEO of IHP Therapeutics, he is leading the development of the first rescue therapeutic for acute treatment of vaso-occlusive crises. And he holds an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, an MS from Vanderbilt University, and a BTech from the Indian Institute of Technology. Our third speaker will be from Genetics Biotherapeutics with Jeraine Willoughby, and she resides in St. Louis, Missouri, and serves as a patient and community educator at Genetics Biotherapeutics. With over 20 years of experience in the healthcare and pharmaceutical sectors, she is committed to fostering strong relationships and providing education and support to patients, enabling them to make informed healthcare decisions. Jeraine looks forward to engaging with and assisting the sickle cell community. In her capacity as a patient and community educator at Genetics, Jeraine offers a range of patient-focused educational services and resources. So I'm going to hand it over to Jasmine Coleman here to kick off our presentations.
Thanks so much, Abby. Great to see everyone today. I am going to share slides first. Okay. So today, just to give an overview, want to catch up from the last time we were together at the first show and tell earlier this year, share some updates since April. I'll then go into the demo of our patient application. Really excited to share that with everyone so far, and then talk a little bit more about what's to come. Please ask any questions. I know Abby has time dedicated. Write them down, don't forget them. Open book. All right. So just as a reminder, we are at Quilt Health. We are really focused on the fact that everyone should have, everyone living with a complex condition like sickle cell should have access to expert care, a supportive community, and innovative treatments. And so what we're building is a platform to advance that mission. And this platform is really built on the premise that there are lots of places where different stakeholders are working individually, whether they're a health system, a biotech or pharmaceutical company, community-based organization, but there aren't as many places and ways for them to play together. And there's so much collaboration that is already happening in this space. We really want to be a part of championing that and making that even easier to result in people living the best lives that they can, especially considering all of the advancements that we are making in terms of treatment and care. Our approach is really centered around building with those that we are serving. So it's really great so far to build in partnership with warriors, with providers, with community-based organizations, with groups like with Sickle here today. It's really fundamental so that we aren't building and then showing up with something prepackaged, so to speak, but we like to say we are in the kitchen and sometimes at the grocery store with stakeholders. So since April, a couple of updates. I'll start on the product development side. But really, the past 3 months, I think I'll just go back even to the show and tell earlier this year. We talked a lot about what we learned over the past couple of years since incorporating in March of 2024. And the past couple of years have been, first and foremost, a lot of listening. We have had the pleasure of meeting people all over the community at gatherings like those organized by Sick Cells, SCDAA, National Alliance of Sickle Cell Centers, a number of other meetings and gatherings, Sickle Cell Consortium. And so we really were talking about what we took away. And there were some key points that really bubbled to the surface that I'll touch on when I go through the demo. But since then, in addition to continuing to learn, we've had a couple of key developments that I'll detail here. So, as far as product development is concerned, we are building out the mobile application on the patient side. Originally, we were showing, what's to come with the application. I'm really excited to show a demo of the mobile app today. It really gives us the ultimate functionality to be able to customize the experience. And throughout the build, we've been gathering community feedback to really develop and refine the capabilities. I'm definitely shouting out all of the beta users who took time to try the application and provided critical feedback and continue to. Also shouting out True Believer Strategies, Denise's team, another group that provides critical feedback, and it's really, really an honor to partner and build with them. In the community learning and engagement domain, I also want to call out again, we've had the pleasure of meeting and learning from folks at FSCDR, at the SC3 Leadership Summit. It was our first time attending this year. We will definitely be back. And now I'm presenting actually from WarriorCon. So again, just really appreciate the welcome from the community to learn and build together. And as far as partnership and collaboration is concerned, you are hearing it first here today, but we will be shortly announcing deepening partnerships with the Mass Sickle Cell Association and Boston Children's Hospital. So really exciting work happening, lots more to do. So there'll definitely be many steps along the way, but progress is always a good thing. I'm going to switch my screen now to share the demo. Give me 1 second. Okay. So I'm going to just walk through four of the key areas that really touch on what we talked about as far as learnings when we were together last time. And these four areas are basically unifying records or aggregating information relevant to your health, finding a specialist, exploring treatment, and mapping the journey. And all of this is supported by a person in the loop, so to speak, and we call that person or that role a guide. So I'll start here. And again, this is a mobile native app. So this would be downloaded from the App Store. You would create a profile. There is a flow before you reach this screen that handles a consent for access to medical information or sensitive data, information, et cetera, so that you can build your profile. But once that's complete, this is where you land. And again, this is our patient application. There's a different application that faces the provider side, and we'll definitely share more as that progresses at a later date. Okay, unifying records. This is really central. This is the way we can not only personalize the experience, but really start to think about how we help information live in one place so that all of the stakeholders who need to have access or would benefit from having access or be able to better serve someone living with sickle cell if they had access here in this space. And all of the access is governed and controlled by the patient or the user or the owner of that information. So the connection here is either through a consent to request records or logging in with credentials that are similar to how you use in my chart. And that is a way to connect the sources from the app to the information in your medical record and pull it through here. And we do show here just the ability to surface trends. These may not be the final trends, but this is hopefully giving an idea of the type of information that it might be helpful to surface without having to dig deeper into the records, so to speak. And as far as the guide that I mentioned, I'll just click here to show, at any step along the way, if you have a question, if you want to talk to someone, if it's more technical support or just understanding a feature, there is always the guide here that can speak to, in this case, connecting records if there are questions about it, and about how we manage them, et cetera. I'll go next to specialists. This is another key component of the application as we, again, believe everyone should have access to the highest quality of care and guidelines-based care. And that really starts with, having a specialist or a team. And so when we work directly with systems, we are starting from the provider. There's also a flow in which we're starting and able to support eventually patients who do not have a care team in finding one. And so here you can see there's ability to search by location, surface specialists that are in a given area or radius. And then as far as how we support making that connection, there are a couple of options. If someone wants, more hands-on experience, they can definitely chat with a guide, share more about their preferences, what they're looking for, ask questions about, how to complete this referral, and we can be really hands-on and supportive there. Or if they just like to schedule directly or book directly with the center, we can also facilitate that. And so the key here is in working so closely with the provider community, that we, have a very clear understanding of their protocol for making sure anyone who's looking for care knows that they've put their hand up. And so that is one of the ways that we're facilitating that connection through the application. I'll go now to treatments as trials and therapies, of course, really critical part of receiving guidelines-based care. And here on the therapy side, of course, you see two FDA-approved treatments. And this, I'll just highlight, if it's at a center you're connected with, you'll be able to see that so that you're clear on what's being offered where. But there'll also be the ability to learn more. So clicking in to learn more about, a certain trial or treatment, definitions, quick facts, especially details regarding eligibility as well, are contained here. So the information you need to get started, but again, the guide is here if there are deeper questions or other things that you're looking for to understand, especially as far as the ability to access at a given center that you may be connected with. And the last place I'll go here is journey. This is kind of where everything comes together. There are a number of things held here. The first one I'll call out, it's at the top of the screen, this care milestones dashboard. We're working really closely with providers at a few centers to understand, that there are so many things that warriors need to accomplish over the course of a given year to stay healthy and keep certain information up to date, whether that's an eye exam or certain labs that need to be done. And so we're really thinking about how we can have a list that's readily available of those milestones that need to happen. In a better way to track if they're happening or not, so that the provider team can support and intervene according to the need as far as getting those completed in a timely fashion. This is also a place where the care team is listed. So, we definitely heard from some warriors. It'd be great to have just a list of everyone who's on my team in one place. And again, the way we think about it at Quilt, we don't only think about, who's on the team as far as the provider or in a health system, but also, critical support that's coming from the community, critical support that's even coming from family. And so trying to give all of those things a place to live in case you need to reference or share them. And then also, in accordance, just a place for all of the care locations or the sites where you receive care to be listed as well. We will be excited also to have, content throughout the application that just provides information or details that also might be of interest. And really proud to already be partnering with a number of warriors and community leaders on that front. I'll shout out Sickle Cell 101. We did a collaboration for World Sickle Cell Day, but just an example of the content leader, the type of information that we really look forward to elevating as we build out this application. I'll stop my share there. And again, I look forward to any questions. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And we will have a Q&A at the end, but I will just answer this one question that popped into the chat here. It looks like somebody had missed how to access the Quilt app. Can you just reiterate when it will be
Ah,
available and how they can access it?
Abby, you are reading my mind because I realized I had a couple more slides that speak exactly to that. So let me go back here. Okay, one quick note just before I get there. We like to call this out just in case anyone has this question as well. I talked about how we, really is important to us to build in partnership. There is no cost to use the platform for warriors, and the call out that consent is key. So at every step of the way, we make it clear again how to share information, also how to not share information, and that consent is really key. As far as accessing the application, so yes, QR code is here. Please join the waitlist if you're interested. We are launching region by region, and really feedback from warriors is a key component of how we decide where to go next. So please join the wait list. We really appreciate even that nod and feedback. And I will say one of the first regions that we'll be active in is the New England region, given the work we're doing with Boston Children's and the Mass Sickle Cell Association. So if you're in that region in particular, please let us know. Join the wait list and feel free to even send an email directly or shout out while you're here. And I'll just call out if you'll be at the NASIC meeting in Wisconsin next week, or with Cayenne in September, SCDA in October. We're at the Six Cells Digital Therapeutics Conference in ASH. Those are just some of the places that will also be out in the community. So please find us. Thank you in advance again for the interest.
Great. Thank you so much.
And I, again, reporting from WarriorCon. So it's a very exciting day.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next guest speaker here, Rinko Ghosh from IHP Therapeutics. Rinko, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you for having me. Can you all see my presentation?
I'm able to see the slides that I'm sharing.
Great, thank you. My name is Rinko Ghosh, and I'm CEO of IHP Therapeutics. We're developing the first self-administered home rescue therapeutic for sickle cell vaso-occlusive crisis. Think of it as an EpiPen for sickle cell disease, if you will. You all know a lot about sickle cell, so I won't bore you with the details. But for us, what's really important is looking at the impact of every vaso-occlusive crisis in a sickle cell disease patient and being stunned by the fact that there's no drug approved for acute treatment of vaso-occlusive episodes. And we'll talk a little bit about, all the great work that's been done by many of you and others in coming with prophylactic therapies, gene therapies. But what we're trying to solve is when uh, a person goes into crisis, what kind of treatments can we make available beyond hydration and opioids? And what is also stunning is if you look at hereditary angioedema, which has less than 5% of the patient population, they have 12 therapies approved, including 5 on-demand acute rescue drugs, whereas there's none there for sickle cell with over 100,000 patients in the US alone. So what we have developed is a novel therapeutic known as IHP-102, which is an upstream complement and p-selectin inhibitor, with a dual mechanism of action, we believe that vaso-occlusive episodes need multimodal mechanism of action. And we are following on the coat trails of de-risk biology because there are two large randomized clinical trials that showed that heparin is able to reduce and ameliorate vaso-occlusive crises in hospitalized patients and also reduce the incidence of acute chest syndrome. However, there's some bleeding risk with heparin. What we've done is got rid of the bleeding risk, but kept all the good properties of heparin in this novel molecule. And home-based acute rescue, we believe, is really important because it empowers the patient to control their own destiny. Again, you all know these statistics, so I won't bore you with the details, but it's still shocking to us that there are over 200,000 emergency room visits triggered primarily by vaso-occlusive episodes. And despite all the good work done with gene therapy and prophylactic therapies, um, other than hydroxyurea, which has its pluses and minuses, really there's no approach out here to make sure that vaso-occlusive episodes are treated quickly and appropriately, and preferably at home before it crescendos into a crisis. Again, this landscape is what really drew our attention when we founded the company in 2020, 6 years ago, to say there's a lot of great work being done to look at prophylaxis at home, gene therapies and other approaches in the clinic, but no one is working on resolving acute vaso-occlusive episodes at the onset when it starts. Hence the EpiPen analogy, saying, can we empower the patient to take destiny and control of their own disease in their own hands and use a therapeutic to maybe nip the crisis as it starts. And this is well documented in medical literature. When you look at the pain crisis, sickle cell pain crisis starting out, we want to nip it at the bud right here when it starts before it crescendos into a full-blown crisis. And our goal is to keep the patient at home and prevent them from needing to visit the hospital. And as you all know, there's been a lot of great work done, including with this foundation itself. Many members have been involved in the 2014 FDA Voice of Patient meeting that was held, where sickle cell people with sickle cell disease said our two top patient needs are treatments that patients can self-administer and treatments that stop a pain crisis in its track right at the onset. And many of us are aware of family members, others who've landed up in the emergency room and they've been, treated like opioid-seeking drug users, and the unfamiliarity with the average ER doc to even recognize the symptoms, let alone treat the patient with dignity, is what really motivated us to come up with this empowerment therapeutic, if you will, where the patient can, at the first signs of onset, and I was really intrigued by Jasmine's presentation. I was hoping someday we'll have an app. I know people are working on wearables which says you're about to have a vaso-occlusive crisis, and we are hoping to work as early as possible to prevent the crisis from getting full blown. And this is what the patient would like. This is what the FDA hopefully will also align with, and that's what we've been working with. Um, there've been sadly, a lot of failures on the therapeutic side, as you all know. Even yesterday, I believe Agios announced that tebapivat will not be moving forward sickle cell. It's a really difficult disease to prevent, to treat. And we have taken all the clinical learnings from past failures and try to bake it in to IHP 102. The first being that single pathway agents have consistently failed, and there are numerous examples of this. And we are working on a dual mechanism, which is it prevents complement from getting overblown and activated, and B, it helps prevent adhesion. So two key modalities that we believe are really important. Second, timing of dose really matters. There have been many drugs that have failed because, and Sebiprant is a good example because they waited too late to administer the drug after the patient got to the hospital. Our cutoff is you have to administer a drug in the first 24 hours as soon as symptoms of vaso-occlusive episode appears. And the third point is given all the racial stigma and the huge amount of medical literature saying that healthcare utilization is a potential problem for this patient population, we don't want to rely on a healthcare endpoint. We want the patient to self-report their pain. We want a patient-reported outcome as the primary endpoint. Again, we won't go into details of the clinical trial. We haven't started yet. We are less than a year away from the clinic, but we have thought this through, try to bake in all the learnings from the FDA meetings, from the clinical trial failures, and move into a quick trial in the acute setting where we might look at the reduction in patient-reported pain as the primary outcome and hope that we can come up with something that within the first 24 hours either resolves all the symptoms or alleviates the pain and keeps the patient from going into the hospital. That's our primary driver. Um, Again, we have a lot of clinical and regulatory thinking of how to approach the FDA. But one of our primary considerations here is there's a lot of precedent in hereditary angioedema, in the field of migraine and acute pain that we can leverage on so that we can really focus on relying on what the patient is saying as opposed to relying on healthcare utilization. That's our primary approach, is to trust and empower the patient and also hope that the FDA aligns with that strategy. Um, and as I said, we were founded in 2020. Sickle cell disease has been our top priority since then. A lot of us have a lot of personal history of people we know with the disease, which is why I got involved. And our lead molecule right now is less than a year away from clinical studies. We are very lucky to get some large grants from the NIH and the Department of Defense and some family office funding, which has propelled us this far. Our goal is to get ready for the clinic and come up with phase one and phase two data shortly. And again, we want to get this right because the FDA is always nervous about the patient injecting themselves because of potential safety reasons. So we are working on a lot of safety studies right now in animals, making sure we de-risk the program as much as we can. And then this team has been working together for a long time, since 2020, and also at a predecessor company. Even though we are a small team, we've been very fortunate to have a large group of individuals from the NIH and other agencies that have been working with us, helping us because they do understand this niche that is unfulfilled, which is what happens when you have a vaso-occlusive crisis. It's great to prevent and or to cure, and we're all for that. But if you look at the landscape of at least 200,000 vaso-occlusive episodes continuing to occur in the US alone every year in the near future, we see a great need. And we are helped by some great advisors, sickle cell disease experts, complement experts, and hematologists that we are working with. So let me stop here and see if there are any questions or clarification. And thank you again for giving us the opportunity. Great question. So our goal is to make sure that as soon as the IND is filed, we are going to be working with Global Clinical Trials, which is the leading sickle cell disease CRO, that we are focusing on the first trial entirely in the United States. We're going to pick a sickle cell center of excellence and make sure that we reach out through the Sickle Cell Foundation and other organizations to appropriate participants.
Great. Great. Well, thank you so much, Rinko. We really appreciate hearing about your upcoming clinical trial. And we're going to hand it over to Jeraine Willoughby now from Genetics Biotherapeutics.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. As mentioned already, my name is Jeraine Willoughby, and I'm one of the patient and community educators with Genetics Biotherapeutics. Just like Jasmine, I'm currently in Los Angeles preparing to join the Warrior Conference that is to begin later today. So you can go to the next slide. You can skip that as well because you already went through that. So this is the agenda of some of the things that I'm going to try and hit on today, just to do a introduction again of who Genetics Biotherapeutics, quick overview of the sickle cell disease, the different treatment types, and gene therapy specifically for sickle cell disease, and then Lyfgenia. We'll go through some important safety information and the clinical study results and the treatment journey if time permits. Next slide. So, as I mentioned before, Genetics Biotherapeutics, we were formerly Bluebird Bio. And in 2025, the company went through a rebranding. They actually just returned to their foundational base where the company was actually called Genetics. While the name may have changed, the mission remains the same, and that is to continue to provide curative therapies for patients with rare genetic diseases. Our sickle cell disease gene therapy has over a decade of research and development behind it. So we've been advancing gene therapy together with the sickle cell community each and every step of the way, and we continue to build upon that relationship. We are very thankful to each and every one of the patients who have been involved in our clinical trials because they have allowed us to continue to improve our gene therapy for sickle cell disease. And we remain committed and focused to our patients and their families by providing support for patients and their families every step of the way. We have a very comprehensive support program that helps patients with resources each step of the way. Next slide. So as each and everyone on this call already understands, from a genetic level, that's what sickle cell disease is marked by unpredictable progressive symptoms as a result of a mutation with one of the genes. Rather than making normal adult hemoglobin, which results in normal red blood cells, patients with sickle cell disease create hemoglobin S, which causes those red blood cells to sickle, thus sticking together, causing a pain crisis, preventing the flow of blood through the vasculature system. Next slide. At present, there are three treatment types that are commonly used for sickle cell disease. Of course, you have your disease-modifying therapies, or DMTs, as they're sometimes referred to. These are oral medications or IV medications like hydroxyurea and other things that many patients are currently utilizing. They offer relief from pain crisis that can be temporary, and they help to deal only with the day-to-day symptoms of the disease. It doesn't address the underlying disease at the genetic level. Next, of course, there are stem cell transplants, or as is commonly known as bone marrow transplants. And these are deemed to be curative therapies, one-time treatments that are generally recommended for patients under the age of 16. And they do require an ideal donor match. That tends to be either another sibling, some instances, a parent, or another family member, which can be difficult for sickle cell patients to find. Now there have been advancements made in treatment for sickle cell disease, and those advancements are offered through gene therapies. They are one-time treatments that are designed to treat sickle cell disease at the genetic level, and they have the potential to eliminate or reduce sickle cell crisis. Next slide. In 2023, December of 2023, the FDA actually approved two different gene therapies for sickle cell disease. Both allow you, the patient, to be your own donor because they use your cells. So you do not have to have a donor, outside donor, for these treatments. Gene editing is designed to treat sickle cell disease at the genetic level by telling the part of the DNA that tells the body to stop creating fetal hemoglobin to turn that back on. When this happens, the body will then start to create fetal hemoglobin, which can potentially stop the sickling of cells. Next is gene addition therapy, and it is designed to treat sickle cell by adding a healthy copy of the beta globin gene. And when happens, the body will then start to make a working form of adult hemoglobin. Next slide. So that's what Lyfgenia is, a gene addition therapy that treats sickle cell disease at the genetic level. And before I go into the clinical trial study and results, I wanted you to hear from one of our patients. Next slide. You can click.
See if I can get it to play that sound for you.
Well, if it's not, that's okay. This is actually just one of our patients. His name is Sebastian.
When you found out you'd been chosen to receive this treatment, the new treatment in 2024, and basically it would modify his blood stem cells to treat the sickle cell. It's called Lyfgenia. Lyfgenia.
Yes.
When you found out you were chosen for Lyfgenia, what did you think?
Basically, I told them, I said yes,
Yes.
right off the bat. Yes.
So when did you start to feel the difference in your body?
So I did infusion December 17th of 2024. I'd say I'd started actually feeling a change probably February, March of 2025. Yeah.
Wow.
Honestly,
I mean, listen, after living your entire life with this condition in that short period of time, to feel the difference for the first time, you are living without sickle cell, controlling your life, and it's considered a functional cure, which means no symptoms.
When I had first got out the hospital, my mom, she made it a thing where it would be like, you know, you have any pain? You have any pain? And I'd sit there and be like, no, Ma, no pain. She goes, hallelujah.
I kept checking.
Next slide. So you can actually hear the entire conversation with Sebastian, his mother Magda, and Tamarin. If you go to YouTube, it was aired on May 7th of 2026. And we are just so happy and excited for him. He was able to come to FSCDR, where he is honestly living his best life. And so we are so happy to see that kind of result for him. So about Lyfgenia, again, it is a one-time gene addition therapy to treat sickle cell disease. It is actually the longest studied gene therapy actually approved for sickle cell disease. It is made specifically for you using your own cells. So again, no donor is needed. It is indicated for patients who are 12 years of age and older with a history of sickle cell crisis. And it works by using a well-studied delivery system that gives your body new information on how to make working hemoglobin that does not sickle. And when this happens, it can reduce or stop sickle cell crisis. Next slide. So a sickle cell crisis is a painful event that happens when sickled red blood cells block the flow of blood. This is known from a medical standpoint as a vaso-occlusive event, sickle cell crisis, as is commonly referred to. In the Lyfgenia clinical trial, we actually looked at vaso-occlusive events and then those that were deemed to be severe in nature. So the vaso-occlusive events were events that required a medical visit to a medical facility. The acute vaso-occlusive event lasted over 2 hours. It could be acute chest syndrome, so a blockage of blood vessels in the lungs, or where blood trapped or pooled in the liver or the spleen. The severe vaso-occlusive events were defined as the events that required hospitalization or multiple visits to a medical facility, like an ER urgent care, over a 72-hour period, where IV medications were given to the patient, and priapism that required any level of medical attention. Sickle cell crisis blocks the flow of blood, leading to severe pain, can require frequent ER or medical visits, creates a disruption to the daily life, not only of the patient, but as well as their family, dealing with work, family, obligations, things of that nature. And long term, it can result in organ damage. Next slide. Before we go into the clinical trial study design and results, I have to give you some important safety information. At the time of the initial FDA approval, 3 patients were diagnosed with blood cancers. 2 of those patients were treated with an earlier version of Lyfgenia that used a different manufacturing process and transplant procedure, and 1 patient had alpha thalassemia trait. Treatment with Lyfgenia may increase your risk of developing blood cancer, which can be life-threatening and or cause death and can develop many years after treatment with Lyfgenia. The bottom line is it's very important to have a discussion with your healthcare provider for this treatment as well as any medical treatment when it comes to weigh the benefit of the treatment with the risk. Next slide. Next slide. So in the clinical trial, again, Lyfgenia is the longest studied gene therapy approved for sickle cell disease. And 45 patients were treated with Lyfgenia and evaluated for safety. The median age was 25. So the youngest patient was 12, the oldest was 43. However, the clinical trial was open to patients up to the age of 50. The median duration of follow-up for those patients was 42 months. Next slide. This is what the actual clinical trial protocol looked like. Again, there were 45 patients that were involved in the clinical trial. Those patients were evaluated for safety. Also, the safety results came additional information from the long-term follow-up study of those 45 patients. The efficacy data for the clinical trial of Lyfgenia came from the 36 patients that were in study group 1C. Those patients underwent the exact same cell collection, transplant, and manufacturing process that is currently utilized today. Next slide. Now, going back to that important safety information that I mentioned, this slide here just brings the information into context. So again, treatment with Lyfgenia may increase your risk of developing blood cancer. So at the beginning of the clinical trial, study 1A, that was the earliest part, the beginning, there were 2 individuals that were treated with an earlier version of Lyfgenia, and they used a different manufacturing process and transplant procedure at that time. Those 2 patients did develop acute myeloid leukemia and unfortunately did pass away during the clinical trial. In the study 1C, which was the latter part of the clinical trial, there was an individual with alpha thalassemia trait, and they were diagnosed with myelodysplastic syndrome. And this is what led to the PI inclusion of the limitation of use for individuals with alpha thalassemia trait and for individuals with more than 2 alpha globin gene deletions. It is important to remember that individuals living with sickle cell disease have an increased risk of blood cancer as compared to individuals without sickle cell disease. And the treatment process for gene therapy can be very stressful on your blood system, including the need to produce new cells, which may increase your risk of blood cancer. So the bottom line is, again, patient safety is the priority. That's why it is recommended that patients have follow-up every 6 months for a minimum of 15 years after being treated with Lyfgenia. Next slide. So here are what the efficacy results showed. Again, Lyfgenia is a one-time transformational therapy. It showed to have the potential to decrease or stop sickle cell crisis. In the clinical trial, of the 36 patients that were evaluated for efficacy, 32 of those patients had a history of at least 4 or more vaso-occlusive events in the 24 months prior to the start of the clinical trial. They were evaluated for the number of vaso-occlusive events that they experienced during a period of 6 to 18 months post-treatment with Lyfgenia. And what the results showed that 88% of the patients did not experience a vaso-occlusive event following their treatment with Lyfgenia, and 94% of the patients did not experience a vaso-occlusive event that was deemed to be severe following treatment. Now, there are a number of ways that Lyfgenia is different from other gene therapies for sickle cell disease. And again, one of which is the time frame in which the evaluation was made for each and every patient involved in the clinical trial. They were actually evaluated at the exact same 6 to 18 month period of time. And this was done to ensure that every patient was evaluated the exact same way. So next slide. So let's take a look at just what those numbers actually mean from a visuals perspective. So this graph is not in the prescribing information, but this is just a breakdown of that 94% of patients who had no severe vaso-occlusive events the 6 to 18 months after treatment. So this graph is what we call a swimmer's plot. There are 32 lines or 32 lanes, and that represents those 32 patients out of the clinical trials who had 4 or more vaso-occlusive events in the 24-month period of time leading to the start of the trial where they received their treatment with Lyfgenia. As you can see, these patients were going through a number of vaso-occlusive events throughout that 24-month period of time. The white circles represent the vaso-occlusive events, while the gray or darker circles represent those that were deemed to be severe in nature. So those where those patients were actually going into the hospital, having to receive acute care at that time. As you can see, after patients received their treatment with Lyfgenia, if you go out to the 6-month period of time, you can see just how significant those reductions were. So that's where those transformational results are truly seen for those patients. I also want to point out that there was no clinically meaningful difference in the efficacy or safety observed for patients, whether they were adolescent or an adult patient. So it worked well for each patient type involved in the clinical trial. Next slide. Another differentiating factor for Lyfgenia is the fact that we actually have long-term stroke data. There were actually 5 adult patients in the study who had a history of stroke or blood vessel problems that were receiving chronic blood transfusions before their treatment with Lyfgenia. All 5 no longer needed blood transfusions and have remained stroke-free for 4 to 5 years, and that was after the clinical trial actually stopped. So 4 to 5 years based on 2023 when the clinical trial was approved by the FDA. Next slide. And this is what the treatment journey looks like. So you can see there's a QR code here on the screen. So you can please feel free to use your phone. Anything that I'm presenting in this presentation, you will be able to find at lyfgenia.com, as well as the information on the treatment journey. So the treatment journey, as it lays out here on the screen, pre-treatment step 1 is when the patient is sent to the Qualified Treatment Center, or as we refer to it, a QTC. This is a medical institution that has been trained on how to properly administer Lyfgenia treatment. They will go through consultation, evaluation, and then once the patient and the clinical team feel that they are a candidate for treatment with Lyfgenia, they move on to step 2, which is the cell collection. And this is done in 2 parts: mobilization, where patients receive medication that helps to move the stem cells into the bloodstream. Apheresis is the second part, where those actual stem cells are collected. Step 3 is when their version of Lyfgenia is created. So those collected stem cells are sent to the manufacturing site. They receive the modified beta globin gene, and then there is the creation of the new adult hemoglobin that is created, the patient's new adult hemoglobin. At this time, the patient is at home living their life. Once their Lyfgenia has been created, they will be called back to their institution. They will go through step 4, which is the conditioning chemotherapy. This is done to make room in the bone marrow to receive the new stem cells. And then step 5 is the actual infusion of Lyfgenia for the individual patient. Step 6 is the recovery and long-term follow-up. It can be anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, depends upon what the protocols are for the particular QTC, as well as how the patient is doing in follow-up. While they're in the hospital, they can then work with their treatment team to establish their long-term follow-up, which again, 6-month check-in over a period of 15 years. Next slide. So again, I mentioned earlier, not only do we have Lyfgenia treatment, but we also provide patients with support that never stops. We have a patient navigator team that does an excellent job of helping the patient navigate gene therapy from the beginning of the process when they're just curious and have questions through the end. Our patient navigators are available at no cost to the patient. They can answer questions, share resources, and there is no need for a prescription to get connected one of the qualified treatment centers. Next slide. So this is Genetic Cares. This is our patient support services. We've actually renamed the program, so we're really excited about some new enhancements that we've been able to make to the process. So while we continue to provide financial support to patients and their families as they're going through the entire process, we've been able to elevate the level of support that is provided. We continue to help them navigate the insurance landscape, as well as providing resources and help for fertility preservation. But one of the new and exciting enhancements that we've been able to add to this is that we are now able to add psychosocial support through our partnership with the National Marrow Donor Program. They will provide emotional support resources for patients and their families as they undertake their gene therapy journey. We've heard a lot of patients express, how they're feeling and the need for support following now the new person that they have become after they've gone through gene therapy. And again, we continue to provide one of the most popular aspects, and that is our peer-to-peer connect program, where patients who are considering treatment with Lyfgenia can actually talk to other patients who've actually gone through treatment with Lyfgenia, and they can share their stories one-on-one with them as they're making their consideration. Next slide. These are some of the patient resources that we have. Again, you see that QR code on the screen, and these patient resources can be found at lyfgenia.com. We have consideration brochures and discussion starters, just a number of questions that a patient who might want to learn more about gene therapy can ask their treating physician to get that conversation started. Next slide. So again, important safety information, what to avoid. After going through treatment with Lyfgenia, patients should not donate blood, organs, tissue, or cells. So very important to remember that. Next slide. Next slide. So in conclusion, again, Lyfgenia is a one-time transformational gene therapy with potential to decrease or stop sickle cell crisis. You do not need a donor. You are your own donor. It is indicated for patients who are 12 years of age and older who have a history of sickle cell crisis. We have no upper age limit. At present, we've had a 56-year-old, a 52-year-old patient that have been treated with Lyfgenia. And it is designed to help your body produce working hemoglobin that can reduce or stop sickle cell crisis. Next. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Terrain.
Absolutely.
So now we're going to open it up. We do have a bit of time left open here for any additional questions that the audience has. If anyone has any questions, you can come off mute or drop it in the chat if you'd like to ask a question. Great. So we do have one question here for Jermaine asking, how does Lyfgenia affect hemoglobin?
I'm sorry. How does it affect the hemoglobin?
Yes.
Okay, so the beta globin, we have a modified version of the beta globin gene that has been created. Once that's introduced to the patient's actual cells, it then helps those cells create a new working copy of the adult hemoglobin. When that happens, it's put back into the body. Those that hemoglobin then helps the red blood cells to regenerate And then once they start to regenerate or engraft, as we say, in the bone marrow, they then start to make red blood cells that do not sickle. If that answers the question.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
And
not.
I see in the I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement that the person put, I'm being evaluated for Lyfgenia at HUP in Philadelphia.
So there was a follow-up question.
Okay.
Does the does this mean that the hemoglobin levels would be back to normal after Lyfgenia?
Yes. Whatever the normal would be for that individual patient. So I'll definitely preface that. And it's if you go into the actual prescribing information, it will have that information as well.
Okay. So I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So it's very heartening and exciting to hear all of the advancements in the treatment landscape. So thank you to all of our speakers who joined us today. For a more expanded look at the therapeutics landscape, everyone, we do ask you to save the date for the upcoming Sick Cells Coverage and Therapeutics Summit. It's going to be November 4th and 5th in Bethesda. And we will have a virtual option as well. We will send out information to all attendees following this webinar, and the recording will be available on the Sick Cells website as well. Right. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you for
Thank you so
having
much,
us.
Abby. Have a good one. Thank you.